Welcome to episode 12 of Breaking the Ice. I'm Elliot Simpson, filling in for your hosts Io Christensen and Jessica Shadian. Accompanying the surge in political and diplomatic interest in the Arctic has been an increase in the amount of people who see the region as an exciting place to do business. Chambers of commerce, entrepreneurs, and big businesses are all starting to recognize the untapped commercial potential of the Arctic for those seeking new markets and those wanting to capitalize on existing ones. What does this mean for Canadian firms wanting to trade more with its Arctic neighbours? And for Greenlandic ones looking abroad? And last but not least, what are the implications for Indigenous-owned businesses? The discussion also includes breaking down barriers and what has and can be done to support free trade agreements in the Arctic. Last week, Jessica Shadian and Io Christensen spoke to the Arctic Infrastructure Alliance of the Danish Trade Council in Toronto, the managing director of the Greenland Business Association, the co-founder of the Inuit Business Council, and one of Greenland's most well-known clothing design entrepreneurs. We hope you enjoy the discussion.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's podcast for Breaking the Ice. This podcast session is a continuation of our ongoing theme on Canadian Greenlandic relations. And this week we have a really fantastic conversation. We have Helene Scherling Olsen, Madeleine Redfern, Christian Keldsen, Louise Lynge Berthelsen here with us to talk about strengthening business cooperation between Greenland and Canada, but particularly Greenland and the Canadian North, and what we need to do to get there, what we're doing already, and how we can strengthen those ties. So I think we should just jump right into things, and I'm going to have every one of you quickly introduce yourself and let us know who you are and where you work. And when Ellen, you can speak because you're first.
Yeah, okay. I'll jump right in because I'm Christian Keldsen. I'm with the Greenland Business Association. I've been with the association since November last year. Before then, I've worked as a consultant and I've helped startups as well. I work as the British consul to Greenland, so I also assist companies coming in, and I've assisted Canadians as well. Before that, I was with Air Greenland, where we flew to Canada for several periods during the time I was there. So I've had most of my work life in Greenland.
I'll go next then. So my name is Helene Scherling Olsen. I'm a senior trade advisor with the Danish Trade Council, or the Trade Council of Denmark, located in Toronto, which is under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Denmark and the Kingdom of Denmark. And I've lived and worked in Canada for the past 30 years, 10 of those at the Trade Council. I've been involved in Arctic affairs and commercial Arctic opportunities since 2012. So that's my main focus area as a trade advisor.
Yes, hi, I'm Louise Lynge Berthelsen, and I'm a fashion designer and entrepreneur from Greenland. I am also a board member in the government-owned largest company that makes seal coats and seal items. And then I have had a retailer in Canada for 2 years now. I have gone and showcased twice in Canada, and I have also been on eTalk Canada, and I have spoken in the Parliament in Ottawa.
Good morning. My name is Madeleine Redfern, and I'm based here in Iqaluit, capital of Nunavut, and I'm the vice president of the Inuit Business Council, as well as owner of a consultant company called Ayungi Arctic Consulting, and the COO of Can Arctic Inuit Networks, which is building a 3,000 kilometer subsea fiber cable from Newfoundland, Labrador, Nunatsiavut, all the way up to the high Arctic.
Fantastic. So my name is Jessica Shadian, by the way. We have Io Christensen, and so we're going to be the hosts for this conversation. And I look forward to getting underway. So I'll just kick it off a bit, and I'll start with you, Helene. And maybe if you could just tell us a little bit more about the Arctic Infrastructure Alliance. I know now there's this new Arctic advisory. Maybe you can tell us some more about that. and what your work is as you're based here out of the Trade Consulate for Denmark in Toronto. So.
Yes, so the Arctic Infrastructure Alliance, or AIA as we call it, is part of a long-term strategy that we have to increase the efforts of working with companies in Greenland predominantly, but the kingdom overall, who want to increase their existing businesses in the Canadian Arctic. So the alliance is created to increase the knowledge sharing and the understanding between the two countries. So what we do as a diplomatic mission, as a trade council, we work with the alliance companies to develop trust relations, contact between stakeholders, between Arctic Canada and Greenland Denmark. And we draw on those narratives that gives us commonality, that gives us reason to work together, and then we scout business opportunities for our member companies. We try to introduce them where their competences are relevant in projects in the Canadian North. And we do that also through our physical presence at the consulate, at the embassy. We represent the companies at events. We go with them or we represent them. Right now we don't go anywhere, but when we do, under normal circumstances, we take our companies in to make sure that we introduce them to the right stakeholders. They can be government to government, the Inuit Business Associations, private companies in the Arctic, and just keep our eyes sort of on the ball as to what is going on in the environment of the Canadian the Canadian Arctic commercial environment. So we try to make sure that we always keep our eye out for the 7 companies that we currently represent, and hopefully more in the future. And the companies are sort of a broad range, but so then particular but not limited to the mining industry and any kind of service related to the mining industry, which is what basically gave birth to the alliance. Telecommunication, logistics, procurement, turnkey solutions for clients in the Arctic that are, companies that can relate to climate and Arctic conditions. So taking the competences from Greenland to the Canadian North and vice versa. And companies engaged in sale of wholesale foods, in particular fish. In this case, with us, it's Royal Greenland Seafood. And so as part of strengthening this alliance, we this year, during the year of COVID, had to think of a lot of different ways of how we can further engage without being physically present. So we established this Arctic Advisory Board earlier this year, and sort of in an effort to break down some more barriers and between Arctic Canada and the Kingdom of Denmark and beyond. So, and that board is, besides our anytime sitting ambassador and consul general, is consisting of some highly passionate people with passion for the Arctic, for Arctic relations, history and culture, and including our newly appointed honorary consul in Nunavut, Navarana Beveridge, who herself has grown up in Greenland and now have lived for many years in Nunavut. So she brings to us a whole range of good value and qualities that we can draw on in this board. So the board will guide us, make sure we stay on topic. We keep our eyes on the trends in the commercial world in the Arctic, that we are relevant and participating in the right events, the right trade shows, and that we create value for the alliance. So the alliance work for Greenlandic Danish companies, helping them to establish and do good work in the Canadian Arctic.
Fantastic. I'm going to move on to Madeleine. I guess one just quick. So is the board made up then of, is it mostly Danish Greenland, or is it also Canadians as well? Or
we have 2 Canadians, we have 2 Danes, we have an international representative and 2 Greenlandic representatives. So nice. It's a broad board in the terms that we wanted to, so one person is from the Arctic Economic Council, so we get that sort of international perspective
Nice.
included, yes.
Okay. So Madeleine, you're also here in Canada. Well, tell us more about the Inuit Business Council. I understand it's relatively new, but tell us more about it.
Yes.
What are you doing?
So the Inuit Business Council was created last year, pretty much just on the cusp or just after we were experiencing the COVID pandemic. There was quite a lot of discussion around the need to support businesses, especially with a loss of contracts and work. And we began as small Inuit businesses to recognize that a lot of the programs that were being developed didn't fit our requirements or our needs. And there are a couple of chamber of commerces here. There is our land claim organization. But so we saw this real need and there was a gap. And so we formed the Inuit Business Council, and it's to represent Inuit small businesses with a majority of 76% ownership. And we have representation on our board from across Nunavut with a goal to expand representation into the other Inuit and Nungat regions as well.
The next question is for Christian. If you could elaborate a bit on the Greenland Business Association, like how long have you been involved?
Definitely, I've been involved since November last year in my current role. But before then, I was actually on the board for many years. I've been working as a consultant for the Business Association as well. And the companies I've been with over the past years, I've been a member in some capacity since 7 or 8. So I know the association quite well. And one of the many reasons for the different companies I've been in for being a member of the Greenland Business Association is to support and have a joint voice when we're talking business terms and the conditions on consultation processes, anything that has to do with politics surrounding how to develop business in Greenland, but also from Greenland with the perspective leading towards the rest of the world, but also for companies coming into Greenland. The Business Association manages 10 industry committees, and we've got anything from communications, telecommunications, to the mining industry, to infrastructure in terms of shipping and flying. We've got all the entrepreneurs, we've got restaurations, hotel, and all sorts of businesses are actually organized through the Arctic Business Association. We have very strong ties with the political system. We have ongoing meetings and dialogues with our different ministers, our bureaucrats, and we're also trying to push and promote a bigger business environment. A lot of things in Greenland are public or publicly owned, and we're trying to push for more private ownership and to make Greenland relevant for foreign investments. And that means stable legislation, an environment where you can invest and rely on the legislation and the conditions. So we're involved in a lot of different things, but it's all got to do with business. And we organize, as I mentioned, a lot of companies, about 330 plus, and that's all the way down to companies with maybe 2 or 3 employees, and all the way up to companies with several thousand employees. And with our current member base, we have about 7,000 employees organized, and we're a country of 56,000 inhabitants. And if we say that all these 7,000 people have a family of on average 3 to 4 people, that's us reaching out to somewhere between 25 and 30,000 people, so half the population of the country. So the work we do somehow affects half the population of Greenland.
Thank you. Next question is for Louise. Would you tell us about your journey as an entrepreneur in Greenland?
Sure. So I started up in 2010, just wanting to. I was educated as a fashion designer, so I started up sewing people's requests and desires. I started up on my living room floor, and it turned into me sewing one dress a day until I made 8 dresses a day, and then eventually had manufacturers in Europe making my clothes. When I was at my top in my company, I had 25 retailers worldwide, and I think I can proudly say that I have the one dress that represents our cultural heritage story, that is the most sold design in Greenland. Also, if we talk about population-wise, there are 57,000 people in Greenland, and you take half of them being women, and then half of them again being females, and then half of them again being the age range of my clothing. They would probably 95% of them have my dress in their closet. I have also written an Amazon best-selling book about being an entrepreneur, together with 20 other women. And right now I am still designing, but I have had a big setback in my company also due to COVID-19, because of the closing down of factories around the world. So I have spent the last 8 months also giving workshops about branding your company in Greenland, or about promoting and marketing your company when being from Greenland and being an entrepreneur, and how you can use that as an extra storytelling point in your company that can open up a whole new market to the world.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so that was very shortly my story.
No, it's great. It's fantastic. It's really interesting. And and so it kind of leads into the question I want to ask to you all, but I feel like there's almost 2 levels or 2 layers. And so we see, all these like business consortiums in the Canadian North and in Greenland forming. And I'm wondering, what you expect, maybe also what we could see in, first of all, I guess, strengthening Indigenous entrepreneurship. But I also feel like there's a piece of this that's on more, let's say, large scale industry, like, when we're talking about mining, telecommunications, infrastructure, which is telecommunications as well. And getting into a little bit what Christian was talking about, where your association is looking at actually some of these larger aspects of building, a stronger business environment and these type of things. And so, first of all, what way can these consortiums help then connect the more, let's say, Indigenous entrepreneurship together? But what can they also do and represent for speaking to some of these much larger types of business cooperation, where there's very similar issues such as infrastructure, mining, telecommunications? So I'm just going to throw that out there for all of you.
Yeah, I can go first. So for the infrastructure, it is crazy, and even more when you are a small company. And when you are a small company, either you are a fashion designer in the northern parts of Canada, Alaska, or in Greenland, you don't have a negotiation, a trade deal between the countries. So whenever I sell something to Canada, they receive it comes with a lot of taxes. They have to pay a lot of taxes to have my designs go into to their country, and the other way around too. So for us to go around that or fix that in some way, like I have held meetings with some ministers here in Greenland about that issue, because our cultural history and our sewing skills, our traditional ways of making clothes with our histories of being Inuits are very similar. And the similarities or some of the similarities in this can really be a sales argument when you want to sell clothes in Alaska
Okay.
or in northern Canada, and also when northern Canada or Alaskan designers want to sell to Greenland, because there are a huge interest between us. I can see that. I can see people ordering clothes from Canada or from Alaska because they want to wear their designs, and also the other way around. I can see, because I send a lot of clothes over there, but it's it has a lot, comes with a lot of taxes, extra taxes. Yeah. So a trading deal between the countries that will support entrepreneurs would be a great starting point.
Yeah, Madeleine, maybe you want to pick up on this, and is this something that the Inuit Business Council, is it more about connecting businesses together, or is there maybe this kind of like external or outreach component that you see the council having?
I think it's both. So it's important that we recognize we need to provide support to our Inuit businesses, and so that they can identify opportunities or support programs that can help them get started or expand their business. And especially when it comes to sort of expanding your business, like Louise said, we also recognize that there really is an interest for territorial pan-northern Arctic trade. But there are too many barriers. So having gone to Greenland and Iceland and other Scandinavian countries, it's frustrating that when we see products that we definitely want to buy and share with our families and friends back home, we can't. So I can't bring back any of the country food, smoked muskox chorizo that you can get in Nuuk, or the whale or different sort of deer, elk, salamis in Tromsø. And then it also extends to sort of items that are not just clothing, but fashion. Seamstresses here want to have access to the commercially tanned seal skins. There's a lot of not just cultural trade that can happen, but doesn't, in part because of these trade barriers. So there's been a growing sort of push and awareness that maybe we need to have an Arctic free trade to facilitate trade from Alaska to northern Canada to Greenland and Iceland and our other Scandinavian trading partners. And that it really is, it appears to be that a lot of the existing trade is really focused on our national southern country sort of products rather than our northern products, which are very different and distinct. In addition, though, on the large scale opportunities, there's definitely a lot that can be learned from each other. We're seeing very similar types of not only big opportunities, but in some cases pressures regarding mining sectors, as you just said, transportation, telecommunications. And reality is that as we see even increased shipping, between, let's say, Baffin Island, which is Nunavut, northern Canada, and Greenland, there's real concerns about things like search and rescue if something happens, if there is a ship that with an oil spill, and the need and the value to develop the local capacity to have that infrastructure and have that coordinated response. And so while I understand and appreciate that the Arctic Council does a lot of really good high level interpolitical, geopolitical sort of work, the reality is that we also need to have businesses, our people in the communities, develop those skill sets or have access to capital that allows them to be part of these types of large infrastructure projects at all levels. So even we've have women that sometimes they sew uniforms or other aspects that's needed in the mining sector, catering, and learning from our partners. How does it work there? What has worked, what has not worked? We also see some of the same, very large geopolitical actors like Chinese companies wanting to come into our regions. And so the more that we can even share information about, what we've learned and where it makes strategic sense for us to align with certain national or international business partners is a good thing. And possibly also to share, where there might be concerns about, not partnering with a particular company if they've not done good business in another region.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to just ask one follow-up, and then I'm going to turn over to Helen and Christian, and then I'm going to turn over to Io to ask some more questions. But Madeleine, picking up quickly on what Louise was talking about, has the conversation about trying to do some sort of free trade deal with Greenland, has that made it to the PMO office at all? Has there been a federal discussion about that in Canada at all?
Well,
There's a federal discussion
there
about
have been
this.
federal officials that absolutely have heard this at, some of these conferences like the Arctic Circle, but has it made it to the level of the PMO's office? Probably not. But this is also where, it's important, not just one country, not one sort of, tiny sector, that it comes as a unified sort of voice at the Arctic Economic Council, at the Arctic Council, by our respective businesses in our own country. Just as it takes a long time to grow that understanding and awareness. But to say that there is trade, opportunities absolutely within our northern regions, that is not happening because of trade barriers. So I think, if we keep up that pressure, I'm hopeful that one day we could see a reduce of the barriers, and that once those barriers are sort of, removed, I'm confident that there's going to be a lot more trade. Nothing bothers me the most than when what we hear is like, oh, no, you don't need that trade because you're, making or selling or, producing similar products. And it's like, well, yet as a country, we see ourselves exporting and importing a lot of similar products, between us and the United States and our European nation trade partners, as well as elsewhere. The concept that somehow we don't need to trade is one that I think is unfortunately either prejudicial or still of a very, colonial mindset. And we need to, challenge that.
Yeah. And then I guess, Helene and Christian, in your capacity in both of your organizations, do you do any of that? Let's say, whether it's kind of diplomatic discussions or even like, efforts towards, like, I don't want to say lobbying, but like, in any of your efforts, do you talk about trying to expand, free trade and create a free trade environment to help strengthen business collaboration?
We definitely listen to our companies, and the observations are exactly the same as Madeleine mentioned as well. It's the barriers. There's a lot of willingness to do business together, but of course, Canada and European Union have the CETA agreement, which has tariff reductions or no tariffs basically. Unfortunately, Greenland is not a member of the EU in that capacity in the trade, but there is a lot of talk, and I think to a certain level, political willingness to hopefully discuss some way of having like a northern agreement that could ease this up. And I see also, with the opportunities coming up now that we have in the next couple of years, when Greenland has bigger airports and we can sustain more transportation between Greenland and North America, more air freight, easier air freight, faster freight, that again opens up another channel of how to trade, even smaller stuff like Louise's like fashion that doesn't necessarily come in big containers, but small packages that can be easily delivered if you do mail order, and reduced tariffs on that and what have you. We hear that all the time. And what we hear as a trade council and as a diplomatic mission, we of course listen, and we try to we try to put that into our report and observations that we send back to our Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That's how it works. Like, so we observe, we report back, and then we suggest, and then we hope that there's actions taken on the next level that we're not, technically part of as a trade council, but we can certainly relay what we hear on the ground from our companies and from the stakeholders we deal with.
If I may add something, I can say that I gave a speech to the Parliament in Ottawa in 2018 regarding this matter, and just trying to paint a picture of how important it is to have this trading deal between our countries. I have gone to Toronto Fashion Week and showcased my clothes, and I had a potential big retailer, which was a big chain in Canada, but it didn't succeed due to that missing link. And I gave a speech about that because it's I am well aware of the big the big companies and the where the big money are in Greenland, oil, minerals, and so fish and so on. But there is just also this potential, and if you look at it as when you look at the clothing industry, it is the second largest industry in the world. So there is a big potential that isn't fulfilled right there.
And I'd like to add to what both Louise and Helene said in terms of what the business association, how we would be involved. We would often be part of a consultation process, and we would open a dialogue with our companies to see what would the interest in the different markets be. There's a huge political interest with the current government in Greenland in terms of setting up trade agreements with other countries. What it all boils down to is obviously it's very expensive to both put these in place. It takes time, but it's also fairly expensive to maintain. So there needs to be kind of a demand, and there needs to be a market. And that's where we often come up short, because there is not really a big market. Greenland as a country is too small to be a relevant market for a lot of products. And that's where Greenland is not interesting to a lot of companies coming in, especially from North America. So then we're back to the smaller scale. Madeleine mentioned some food stuff, local food stuff. Obviously, we've got Louise's products as well, but it's all on a downscale, small scale. So from a political and financial perspective, it becomes a fairly difficult task to do this. And just to give an example, if say we get the new airports in place, or when we get them in place, but if we have direct routes into North America, just setting up bonded warehouses and all the agreements that have to be in place and all the bonds that have to be in place for Air Greenland or whatever airline to be able to import-export cargo is a huge investment for these companies. And if all we're talking about is a couple of kilos of food stuff here and a couple of dresses there, then we're in trouble, because then the trade-off is not in balance. Mm. But then again, if you say that, you're also saying we can't do anything because we're not big enough, and we won't know the size or the potential until something happens. So sometimes you just have to jump into it and say, this is a risk we're taking. And then it's down to who the heck's going to take this risk? Is it the airline? Is it the government? Is it the smaller companies? And I bet the smaller companies won't be able to bear that risk. The cost of partaking in these huge costs on the exports would be a challenge for the minor companies. And that brings us back to us. These are some of the things that we help on bringing into light.
No, it's a good way of looking at it. It's the chicken and egg, right? That we experience all the time. And so it needs to be driven by the bigger, maybe entities that have more capital and ability to do so, but do they want to make the investment if they don't? So it's
And I think Louise said it best. The most likely thing that we're going to see is something to do with our fisheries or with the mining industry, because that's where we've got the economies of scale. That's where we've got some industries with some kind of leverage and size that could be of relevance. But the current situation, say North America, it makes more sense for Greenlandic companies at the current situation to export their fish and other fish produce to European and Chinese markets than to North America, because the market prices are better that way. So there's no real demand or any drive for opening up anymore towards North America because other markets are more interesting. And then that brings us back to other things we've seen. We've tried to set up links that are based on cultural exchanges. These are even minor when it comes to the size and the economies of scale. And I'd just like to bring up an example. We set up a new Canadian route in 2012, I think, or 2010. Around that time, we flew to Inuit, which we'd done for 20 years between 81 and 2001, and it was closed for more or less 10 years. And the first year, we had a few people exchange from families that hadn't seen each other for a while. That was season 1. Season 2, most seats were empty because the interest just wasn't there, or the market wasn't there. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing. Is we're seeing smaller markets, and smaller markets connecting to another small market. You need to connect to something different. You need big markets.
And maybe just to build on that is that some of the trade barriers have been reduced in the fishery section, in particular because in Nunavut we don't have ports to be able to land the turbot or the shrimp. And those are also sort of shared fish stocks for the most part. And I do think that we have missed some opportunities to look at even, combining our catches and being able to negotiate better, sales of our fish products around the world. But absolutely, there is without a doubt, at the same time, significant interest to see even, for the longest time, it was hard for us to even access our own, seafood products that were being fished off of our communities. And it's since COVID, we've actually got a lot more of that product that is coming back to our communities, and it's world class, it's highly nutritious. But it was bizarre that we literally knew that a lot of this product was being fished and not being made, even a bit our own being made available. But there is, I think, we need to look at where these opportunities are. I think that there are areas where we could be a lot more strategic, but it's really hard when if I want to go to Nuuk right now, I'm going to either be forced to fly all the way down to Ottawa and Montreal, fly over to Copenhagen and back again, or if I'm lucky, I might be able to get a flight to Iceland back, and it's only 1 hour flight away. So the fact of not having any more, and hopefully sometime in the future, those direct flights, it's really hard to have not only these geopolitical sort of discussions and developing trade or economic strategies and facilitating trade at all levels, and figuring out where we can do more cooperation together and intertrade. So that's the biggest barrier right now. Is it's so much harder to travel across the north. And where I think for the most part, a lot of us are forced to go south, and the costs are incredibly prohibitive. It's not only, the money for those airline tickets, but the time it takes.
I'd like to add another thing, because obviously you're making a point. We're 2 hours away and have to travel all the way through Europe and what have you. But we're also very focused on people. We're very focused on tangible products. There are also services that could be of relevance to our regions, and we've touched upon this before with the Arctic construction, for instance. Some of the experiences being done in Arctic Greenland could also be relevant to Arctic Canada and vice versa. And I always like to bring up the company of 90 North, because when I take a stroll out in Nunavut, close to Nuuk, some of the buildings that are built by a Canadian company, 90 North. When I come to Inuit and I take a walk, I see the exact same buildings, even in the same colors. And these buildings and the technology has worked quite well, but it seems as if it's stopped there. I know we have companies in Greenland that are interested in expanding their knowledge and moving into Canada as well, and setting up shop, making their experience, and even investing in research regarding Arctic construction. Obviously, there are some standards when it comes to electricity, inches versus centimeters, sizes of fridges, but all these things they're meant to be dealt with. That's not the issue. There are some things in terms of sustainable energy, how you build a sustainable house in the Arctic, and so on and so on.
Even down to how you build or how you start up as an entrepreneur. With this COVID-19 situation, you can sell between countries workshops, or I do tutorials on how to start up a fashion design business also for people in Canada and Nunavut. And it's online. And the opportunity for this had opened up for me due to COVID-19. So it's not all bad.
Yeah.
No, and I think the Corona crisis has given us an opportunity to do a lot of virtual exposure and a lot of events that would otherwise not be attended by so many, because the travel is so complicated. But because we can all look into a Zoom platform, people who normally don't. We recently had the alliance companies participate in the Arctic Development Expo in Northwest Territories. Probably not a place that they would have gone to physically have been present, but because we could do it on a virtual platform, the companies were exposed in an area that they normally perhaps wouldn't prioritize as a very expensive travel area. So I think what we need to do is to keep raising the awareness, and some of the places where we can, as a trade council, can help at least we're put in this world to help the Greenlandic companies in particular, but where we can make them visible is to make sure we represent them, that we are present at the right places, even though the companies may not all be able to be there, having an umbrella that they can be under with us and be exposed and have someone talk their product, talk their business and their competences, that keep raising the awareness. And then I believe also that going forward after this post-COVID world, I mean, tourism, adventure tourism in particular, is a huge strong point for both Nunavut in particular and for Greenland. We see so much interest in people doing that type of vacations, and I think both the areas have fantastic opportunities. And again, if it's made more affordable, if airline routes are readily more available, and you don't have to mortgage your house to fly to a distant place, then that is going to be a thing of the future as well for people to develop a new interest and to experience and actually find out that the Arctic is there. The world has helped a lot because the world in general is showing so much interest in anything Arctic for various reasons, but that kind of interest in terms of the beauty of it and the reasons for why you should go and experience it. We need to work on that, and we do that from a diplomatic level and a cultural level, but also from a commercial level.
I want to jump in? Yeah.
Yes. This question is for all. Generally speaking, is it prominently Inuit who are leading the change for Northern Greenlandic business and entrepreneurship, and how important is this? We can start with Madeleine.
Sorry, I only heard half of the question. Sorry, there's something with the sound.
Sorry. Generally speaking, is it prominently Inuit who are leading the change for Northern and Greenlandic businesses and entrepreneurship, and how important is this?
I think in Greenland, I think we are not so focused on the issue of race, if I may say that, as I think you are over in Canada. I think people doing business in Greenland, Greenlandic companies with a mixed background of say Inuit and European. I think we don't look to the necessarily the race of people, but more of whether this is a local company or a foreign company, whether it's a foreign company coming in, setting up shop. And that is also considered a success, because somebody seeing a market and doing business, setting up locally in Greenland is also good, because then you're creating more business, you're employing people, you're paying local taxes. In terms of the type of people that we would like to see come into business, from my perspective, and I'll look to Louise in a moment, but I'm seeing a lot of younger people who are born and raised in Greenland now looking towards becoming an entrepreneur. I think we have some good programs today, but I'm seeing more and more younger people come up with some, I'm going to say crazy ideas, because these are things I wouldn't have thought of myself. We've got the vertical farmer, we've got greenhouses, we've got people making designs, all sorts of coffee companies, all sorts of funny things. But these are younger people, and obviously, if you didn't grow up in Greenland, you would probably come in with something more established, whereas the entrepreneurial side of things would most likely be people that have come to the country at a young age or have grown up in Greenland, whether they be Inuit or of a European background.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Christian. When I started up as an entrepreneur, I didn't even call myself an entrepreneur, even though I was the first one doing what I did from Greenland. A lot of other people had done designs inspired by the Greenlandic story, but they weren't doing it from Greenland. So being the first one, I didn't even I didn't even call myself an entrepreneur. I just wanted to draw and sew and design and make clothes that was inspired by my cultural heritage. So I know I have gone out and given a lot of speeches, because when I decided to take the leap and become self-employed, it was a huge step for me, and everybody around me were of that belief that I shouldn't, like, you need to have an 8 to 4 job, and then you can do that thing on the side, because that was the more secure choice, and that was what more people did up here. So there has been a huge change the last 10 years of young people wanting to take that leap and just going for it, and also with the social media appearance that has grown rapidly. When I started, I didn't even have a Facebook account in my company, and so they turn to social medias, and they jump right into it and making films and talking and all that, whereas maybe I would be more like nervous to go and talk on the live camera. But it's very, sorry, yes.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So it's a very it's amazing to see, because it's really young and fierce moving forward.
But I think, Louise, you're also making a good point, because the whole focus in Greenland, that comes with our educational system, it comes with the way people are employed. Everything is looking towards public employment or an 8 to 4 job. So I think the barrier of becoming an entrepreneur is probably a lot greater in Greenland, because you're really going against everything that you see around you and grow up with. Whereas in, say, Denmark, which is a relevant place to benchmark against, becoming an entrepreneur is much more likely, and going into private sector is obviously a given. And I think you'll find the same in North America. We're a planned economy. Everything is more or less public. And main part of our education is towards people going in, becoming bureaucrats, working for the public system. So it's that would also be a barrier going forward. And with an environment now created around the few entrepreneurs we have, this is something that's going to move in a good direction over the coming years, is what I'm expecting.
But I think also from the Canadian side, now I can see that Madeleine has dropped out for a little bit.
She got kicked out, so she said.
She's kicked out. Okay.
But go ahead, yeah.
But yeah, I think there has been an ongoing positive trend in Canada and in Greenland as well. Christian, if you agree, to try and retain talent, staying in Greenland, building more university programs, making sure that that they don't all go south or to Denmark for the better positions. And then I can see, over the years that I've hosted Greenlandic delegations, where it used to be the 5 big ones showing up in a delegation, we now have many more small new companies starting up, because we have very good support systems in terms of funding and contributions from Greenland Business Association, from memberships at the Danish Industry Federations, where you can apply some funding to, if you want to participate in a trade delegation, and that has opened up doors for smaller new started company to then go in a delegations with 30 companies, where they can network and hang out with the big guys, so to speak, in the business world, and that way create the network and meet more people and be engaged with bigger and with a new market in a different way and in an affordable way for an entrepreneur or small company. So the trend is there. It's just that we have to, it's an ongoing working process kind of thing.
Madeleine, you made it back.
Yeah, it got cloudy.
And off in the horizon, you saw the potential for a cloud. We were still discussing Iowa's question about, if Inuit are, the ones kind of driving this, driving the entrepreneurship in, at least in Canada, and how important that is.
Well, it's mixed. In Nunavut, we have over 400 Inuit businesses that are registered with our land claim organization. Again, it depends on sort of the size of the company and the products that they're offering, but there are definitely a variety of companies that are also partnerships with non-Inuit or non-Indigenous in the north or even in the south. Most of the focus has been north-south rather than north-north, with Alaska or Greenland or anywhere else. But it doesn't mean that there aren't those opportunities. And I think the Inuit participation on the Arctic Council in particular, as permanent participants and people traveling, do see those opportunities. But again, it's just, there hasn't been enough sort of coordination or focus. I think that the Arctic Economic Council could do a lot more to support and facilitate that. And I would love to see this become a priority area, because I do think that there are a number of Inuit that want to look at least what are those opportunities. Just knowing that they exist, but there's too many barriers makes it hard at this stage.
In Nunavut, do you have a region or country that you see as your closest business partner? What about Greenland? Outside of Greenland, who would you consider to be your closest business partner in Nunavut? We'll start with Madeleine.
So, I personally don't have yet a closest business partner with a business in Greenland, but with the subsea cable, there is an opportunity at some point when we've probably built at least phase 1, which is the cable into Iqaluit, and then looking as we move the cable up to the high Arctic, the possibility of interconnecting the two networks. Because the more that subsea networks are interconnected, the more redundancy you have, and breakages do happen, and you want to have as little disruption as possible. So at this point, it's too early for probably us to have those those conversations, but we are very aware that we've gotten to that stage. We will probably be looking for an ability to work with Tele Greenland.
Whether or not we can have this opportunity to strengthen business collaboration within the North American Arctic, and whether we're going to see, like, let's say, outside forces actually driving, whether there's more fragmentation or things being united, let's say from countries like China, and then so that kind of inhibits in some cases, greater cohesiveness in this area, in this region. But going back to Madeleine, and she was talking about the Arctic Economic Council, having this really big opportunity to step up and play a bigger role. But it also just kind of makes me think, at the same time, a lot of the discussion has been about, the economies of scale and chicken and egg situation. And I just wonder then, by, having these different consortiums, and if there's an opportunity maybe for these entities themselves, I'm talking about the Infrastructure Alliance, the Inuit Business Association, and everything, to actually come together and think through some of these things. And then if there's an opportunity then to help create, if we're thinking about the North American Arctic, to build up economies of scale then, that way through collaboration, then it could help then propel the desire for those to be more risky and to take those first steps to kind of help build like what would be needed to trade it, to help facilitate trade relations, import, export, and these type of things, and build the infrastructure to get there. And I almost want to say this could be the same on the scale of research as well. We're talking about, how we could be building better houses and what kind of innovations those could be. And maybe there's more opportunity then for investment and capital for these type of research if there's a larger economy of scale, if there's collaboration, and strengthening that collaboration. That was just some of my thoughts and takeaways from what we have been discussing, but I'm going to pass it back to you all to jump in with final thoughts of your own.
I believe the next while, once we get out into the real world again, and I think a lot of us have taken, I certainly have, used a lot of this inactive non-travel time to really study and think about ways of bringing people together. And that's our main purpose from the Alliance, is to introduce the right stakeholders to each other. And yes, there are the barriers, but the more networks there are, the more pressure there are from bigger companies and from smaller companies to put on the relevant governments as to how to help them, then the better that is. So it's coming out again, being visual, being present, meeting each other. Arctic nations like to physically meet. The people who live far away from each other and have far distances to travel always enjoy being together in a physical location. So once that's possible again, I think we just need to continue the focus on breaking down the barriers and even easing the mobility between our people, and between talent and education and research, and making it easier to do collaborative work. I think is something that we need to strive for, and that's what we try to strive for in terms of how can we help facilitate that, bring the right people together.
Absolutely. Louise?
Yeah, thank you. And for my part, I would say also networking is really important, because it's through those networks that you gain those names of the people that you can sell to as an entrepreneur. And then what I would hope to see more of is knowledge sharing between entrepreneurs in Greenland and in Nunavut, or in all of these countries that we have been talking about, because there's no reason to invent the wheel when it's already invented. And what I found being a fashion designer in the beginning and feeling very much left alone is that I had to I couldn't find the answers for how to do the things I needed to do within my country. And if I had somewhere place to go and with someone in somewhat similar situations or with the same problems as logistics, just knowledge sharing about how to do the things with other fashion designers from, for example, Nunavut would have really helped me a lot. So I think that knowledge sharing between entrepreneurs would be a huge thing.
Madeleine, do you want to pick up from there?
Madeleine? Did we lose her?
No, I have to see Madeleine, but we can go Christian and then Madeleine. We can do that. Okay.
Yeah, I agree about the knowledge sharing, and what I'm thinking is what we're currently looking at. If we say the Arctic, we're looking at our region is 56,000 people. Nunavut, I believe, is around 25,000. You have Nunavik, you have Northern Territories, and you've got Alaska. If we kind of share the knowledge across that, then Louise would have a better reach out, because she's not just talking to the 56 potential entrepreneurs in Greenland, she's talking to whatever number we're going to end up with across that. And again, that's something that we can share without a physical presence, and it's also something where the barriers are very low in terms of sharing the knowledge. And I agree that knowledge is king when it comes to, or network is king when it comes to starting and setting up. Because one thing is what we've got in Greenland, we've got a lot of support systems, but you're also you're gonna cash in a lot of favors with friends and people with similar experience. And that's, you know, the entrepreneurs that we see that come out of success, they're not afraid to ask the questions and not afraid to use their network. And making that easier for people across the Arctic could have some value to it.
Madeleine? Are you out there? So I'll leave it there. I think this has been really fascinating and very interesting. And I think the beginning, Madeleine, are you there?
It is
Hello?
there.
Yeah, she was there, but then she disappeared. But the beginning of a conversation, I think that there's so much more to be had. And I think this is like just the consortiums that are here is a great place to, you know, help, almost a foundation that could be built from in terms of bringing people together and continuing this conversation and discussion, because I think it is a lot about momentum. It's a lot about knowledge sharing. It's also what Helene's talking about getting the word out to the world. And, you know, and a lot of things are driven on vision and ideas. And so, you know, places become places to be and invest and go to based on, you know, getting the word out there and a narrative around that and the vision and narrative around that. And I think that this is an exciting part of the world. I think we already see that, given how many people around the world and countries are interested in the Arctic. And the important thing is then that the narrative is actually the one being led by those in the North themselves, right? And so that's who controls the narrative and make sure that we're building up this region to be the kind of region that everyone in the region wants it to be, and it benefits them the most, right? So, yeah. Thank you all so much. I appreciate this, and perhaps we can do a round 2 in some time from now and see where we move forward at all and and where we are. So thank you so much.
Thank you too. Thank you.
Take care.
Have a nice day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.